Well, you've had a bit of a preview of what we're going to talk about, but I promise I won't ask you the same questions. First of all, welcome. Thank you for coming. I know that this was a bit of a last-minute thing, but we really appreciate you taking the time and coming up here and talking to us. I'm going to start you out with a rather kind of an open question, and that is, how do you see Nasdaq stacking up for Chinese companies as a place to come and list?
Well, actually, we're quite pleased with our progress here in China. We've had a very long presence here in China, been here over 10 years. We now have 140 companies from Greater China listed on us, including 33 new listings last year, another 17 this year. That 17 includes several switches from our other U.S. competitor, that other U.S. exchange. So we're quite pleased with our progress here. I think we're the single largest Western market for Chinese listings now. So we're quite pleased with that. We have a great team here. We're very committed to the region, and we still see a bright pipeline of companies coming to Nasdaq from all sectors. But obviously the tech sector is one area where we're extremely strong.
Has there been, over the last 18 months, something of a change in attitude on the part of people here in Asia generally, but China specifically, towards the U.S. and towards the idea of listing in the U.S.?
Well, first off, I'd say that we don't compete with the local markets. We really cooperate with them. So we have MOUs in place with the Shenzhen and Shanghai stock exchanges. We work closely and have several customers in the region as well on the technology front. In other words, those that actually license our trading technology and use that as the backbone of their exchanges. So on that front, we really don't compete. We feel that companies that list domestically have their reasons for doing so. We encourage the development of the local markets. We work very closely with the local markets. And we also believe that companies that seek to go overseas will continue to look at Nasdaq as one of the premier choices to do that listing. And those that want to attract a deep institutional investor base, that want to have a global brand, that want to have that currency for acquisitions, the ability to do follow-ons very quickly, those companies, we believe, will continue to choose Nasdaq. And we also believe that our high listing standards are another attraction for Chinese companies to list on Nasdaq in particular when they're thinking about an overseas listing.
One of the challenges that a Chinese company would have that he's just doing a commercial for BlackBerry, by the way. So, one of the challenges that the Chinese companies have in Nasdaq, and even addressing your institutional investor base, that local U.S. companies or even European companies do not have, is that in many cases, institutional investors probably don't know China or Chinese companies well enough to truly understand what their value is and what value they bring to their core markets. What advice can you give to Chinese companies? Now, obviously, we don't want to tell people, hey, go out and prime the pump, right? We want to make sure that we stay within SEC regulations. What advice can you give Chinese companies who are thinking about listing in the U.S., haven't made a formal decision? What should they be doing to ensure that the institutions at least know who they are before they make the listing decision?
Well, first of all, I do believe that the institutional investor in the U.S., number one, has a massive appetite for growth. And China, obviously, over the past few years has been the epicenter of growth, if you will. In addition to that, I do believe that they do understand, in many cases, especially the institutional investors, understand the business models of these companies, for the most part. Now, what should companies be doing as they prepare to go to the U.S. or go to the overseas markets when they think about that listing? I think, first and foremost, they obviously need to build a very strong management team. They also need to build a strong team of advisors. And when I say advisors, I'm including the lawyers, the accountants, the investment bankers, and so forth. And I think building that strong team, starting to think and act like a public company very early, are important key facets in preparing for a U.S. listing. Once they've listed, and also immediately prior to the listing, it's also extremely important to have strong communication skills. I've said in the past, and I think this still applies today, that those companies that have a strong fundamentals or strong financials, yet do not communicate their story well, are not going to maximize their valuation, regardless of where they list, and vice versa. you may communicate till you're blue in the face, but if you don't have the fundamentals, you don't have the financials, you don't have the story to actually tell, you also aren't going to maximize your valuation. So I think thinking and acting like a public company ahead of time, having a strong management team in place, and having a strong team of advisors to guide you through that process are all key things as you prepare for that.
How do you spend your day? I mean, are you spending your day, sitting down and talking to investment bankers? Do you go around the region and talk to companies who look like they're good listing prospects? What is it that you do to really drive awareness of and excitement about Nasdaq in Asia? Or is there a need to drive it because so many people know the exchange and know the role that it plays with ventures and small companies?
Well, to be honest with you, the market's changed so quickly, and Nasdaq itself has evolved so quickly into truly a global player in the exchange space with the acquisition of OMX, which runs the Northern European exchanges, with our other acquisitions in the U.S., including the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, the Boston Stock Exchange, and so forth, that I actually have to spend a lot of time educating companies, educating bankers, educating PE and VC firms about our story, so that they understand that Nasdaq of today is not even the same Nasdaq as 5 or 10 years ago. So that's part of my job. My average day, the beautiful thing about my job is no day is exactly the same. So some days I may be out speaking to CEOs and CFOs for the entire day. These are prospective listed companies. Other days, I may be meeting with our current existing listed companies. Throughout Asia Pacific, we have close to 160 companies now. And so I spend a lot of time throughout the region, obviously the bulk of my time here in China. Other days, I might be talking to the influencers, the venture capital, the private equity guys, the investment banks, the venture, and the accountants, the law firms, and so forth. And then other days, I get to talk to the media and do fun things like today. So it's never boring, but I have to say the best part of my job is meeting the interesting entrepreneurs that are going to be driving the new economy forward, both from China, throughout Asia, and in my previous life at Nasdaq when I was dealing with companies on the West Coast. So it's never boring, and I have to say that I've never found a day where I don't have something to do.
You mentioned a couple of the other exchanges that are under the group now, and the instant thing that anybody in this room is going to be thinking about is, oh, okay, if I'm going to go with Nasdaq OMX, I want to list on Nasdaq. Do you think that there's ever a time where, particularly a Chinese company, should consider one of the other exchanges under your banner? I mean, Jane, for example, was talking about how they've got AIM and the NYSE folks have Euronext, and there may be occasions where one of the other, I don't want to call them products, one of the other bourses under your group makes more sense. Would there be an occasion where it would make more sense to have a Chinese company, say, list in Northern Europe or Boston or Philadelphia?
Well, first of all, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange is not an equities market for us. It's along the derivative side. And we do have occasionally companies that do look at the European market. We also have cooperation with the Dubai market, Nasdaq Dubai. And so we've had a couple instances where Chinese companies have dual listed in Dubai. And we've had companies look at our European markets on the OMX side and First North, which is our small cap European market. I think what you really have to do is look at where your customer base is, what type of or group of investors that you're looking to attract. And at Nasdaq itself, we have 3 market tiers. The Nasdaq Global Select with the highest market standards in the world. Companies like Apple, which became the largest tech company in the world as of yesterday, I believe, in terms of market capitalization, or at least listed in the U.S. Microsoft and Google, which are now 3 of the largest market cap companies in the world. These are all Nasdaq Global Select companies. They've demonstrated to investors they've met that high listing standards. We also have the global market. And then the capital market, which is our lowest market tier. So within Nasdaq itself, we have 3 market tiers that we believe fit most companies that are seeking to do an overseas listing. And then obviously we have our alternative venues that I've just mentioned. And again, I think it depends on the investor base you're trying to attract. It depends on where your customers are, where your consumers are, and where you're building your business.
I want to thank you. This has been some I think, really good advice for any company that would consider a listing. I think it's good advice for companies, even who aren't yet at the stage where you're considering listings. I think you made the most important point. I think you made is it is never really too early to start behaving like a public company. And anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Well, just that obviously this is a tech-focused conference. Nasdaq is the home to technology, the home to innovation and growth. And again, we have the highest listing standards in the U.S. right now, and indeed in the world in terms of listings. So we certainly hope that the entrepreneurs that are out here in the audience, when you're looking overseas to do a listing, that you continue to look at Nasdaq and that Nasdaq remains your primary choice. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, Eric.